Hello and welcome back to another day of Vlogmas. I'm so excited for today's video. I honestly am so proud of myself for one, sticking with Vlogmas, and two, the fact that this year in a really long time, I have been able to read a lot of books. And a lot of books to me may not be a lot of books to someone else. It could be just a small amount. And I want to say when I open up my Fable that I've read over 30 books this year, but as a girl who just graduated in May and was working multiple jobs and has now confined it to one job in the last 10 years of her life, having just one job, like that is such a huge feat for me to be able to do that. So I'm just so excited to be able to do this video because I remember watching other YouTubers make this video last year, and me all throughout my 20s I have been wanting to make YouTube my dream, and I didn't know how I was ever going to make that happen. And now finally being in this place that I've worked so hard to be at in my life to do this. So just kind of wanted to start with that and just thank everybody who's here and who's watching. And yeah, let's get into it. We'll just go month by month, and I am going based off of my reading journal on my iPad. January was a really good reading month for me, and I started out by reading Once Upon a December, and this was a holiday romance that has some magic involved and spans over a period of 20 years. So I read this book January 1st, and I found this one in the Kindle store, and I didn't want the holidays to end last year. I specifically remember I was house sitting, I was doing one of my extra little jobs, I was doing one of my rover gigs, and I specifically remember loving just the magic of this book, and I love the dual POV. I do really like dual POV romance books because I feel like when you just get the female character's point of view, sometimes I'm like, I'm yearning for his point of view. I'm yearning for his, you know, not just his point of view, but like his thoughts, his, you know, what is he feeling? And I feel like sometimes that gets missed. Romance books that only do just like one POV. I really love that, and I think overall my rating was like a 3.5, 4 stars. And I think it was because I felt like Astra, the main female character, was a walking doormat, and she didn't know how to be her own person with anyone. And I loved that Jack, the main character, cared enough to try and get to know her every time the jewel mark was in Milwaukee. And so the reason why the story goes over 20 years is because Jack, the male main character, lives inside this jewel mark that it pops up in every different place, and it's like this magical portal realm that you don't even realize or know about until the end of the book. But it pops up in different places, and they have no control over how it pops up, and it disappears the day after Christmas. And so over the period of 20 years, he never gets older, but he meets this woman, aka Astra, in the beginning of the book, and that's the beginning of that 20-year time span where he sees her and they get to know each other, and she comes with her girlfriends, and then she's of course in a relationship, so nothing really happens between them. And then 20 years later, he then tries to get to know her more, and he always remembered her, and they kind of go through this thing, and it's just pretty crazy. And I also loved she didn't give up her whole life for him, and that there was this compromise and a twist in the end. So if you are somebody who likes a little bit of Christmas magic, but realistic, where it's a real place, Milwaukee, of course, Wisconsin, and you get that magic and almost oh my god, this could be a Hallmark movie or happen in my life. Actually, no, I don't want it to be a Hallmark movie. I want it to be a Netflix movie because it was just so cute. It just wasn't a 5-star for me because, like I said, she was just such a walking doormat. every single person in her life that I really just wanted her to root for herself. And she did in the end when it came to Jack. I just think that it almost came a little bit too late. Moving on to the next book that I read, I picked up In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. This book is kind of like this like time travel fiction book. It has so many mixed reviews on Goodreads, but Danielle, the main character, she's like a type A OCD planner, but I think is because of the trauma of her brother's death at such a young age, and she just calculates her life like down to the second, and she's always planning ahead and into the future, which sometimes like I see so much of myself in her and herself and me in that way, and that I was like, ooh, sometimes it was almost like triggering. That is until her best friend since they were 7, Bella, finds out that she has ovarian cancer, and Daniel's life takes like a complete left turn. Then she kind of has like this, I don't know if it's like a premonition or like she actually has like a going in the future moment. I think more of it's like a premonition than anything. Kind of like sets herself on this spiral for literally like 5 years where she's like, whoa, like what happened? Like she was this perfect person. She tries so hard to not make it true, but then she still ends up making that premonition happen. And it's just so crazy because what happens is like in the beginning of the book, she gets proposed to by her boyfriend. She had it all planned out. Then she had this premonition. She's with this other man. She's not doing the job that she's doing as like a lawyer. She's not this successful person. And then she like kind of wakes up and is like, whoa, like what the heck happened? And it's kind of like this weird, I don't want to say like deja vu because it's not fully explained in the book. And then when she goes with her best friend out to dinner to like meet her boyfriend, where her best friend, the one who gets ovarian cancer, is just like this fun and spontaneous person. And she's like, yeah, I think you're gonna love him. And then what really is like a mind-bending moment is that the guy she had this premonition saw in the future was her boyfriend, her best friend's boyfriend. And so she goes through like watching their relationship, still kind of like turning over in her mind how in the world she ends up sleeping with her best friend's boyfriend, and just really ruminating on this until something really tragic in the book happens, which is Danielle, best friend, passes away. And then of course her and Aaron end up getting together in like a moment of like grief and trauma, and that was the moment she saw in the future. And then of course like everything kind of changes in the end, and it's so much different. I think it was such an emotional roller coaster of a story, and the reason I decided to give it 3.5 stars was because there was a little bit of plot holes. But I will say my 2 favorite quotes from the book, if you haven't read this book before, is love doesn't require a future, and that was such a great reminder. And then her best friend gave her this painting, and I'm actually so glad I'm looking back through this because I remember I wanted to get one for my little studio office beauty room thing, right, that I'm sitting in. And I was young. She was an artist, her best friend, and when she passed away, one of the paintings that she left for her best friend was one that said, I was young, I needed the money. And I couldn't relate to anything so much more than what she had given to Danielle. I just felt very, very conflicted after that book. So if you haven't read it, definitely take a look at this one. The next book that I read is Light Lark by Alex Astor. It has come down to be one of my favorite series of the year. She just came out with Sky Shade, and I'll get to that one as well. That's the 3rd book in this series, and it's a movie series. This is a young adult fantasy. It follows Isla Crown, who is the young ruler of Wildling, and it's a realm of temptresses, oh my goodness, cursed to kill anyone they fall in love with. For me, this was a 5-star read, okay? This was my first 5-star read of the year, and I think it's because Isla is such a beautifully written character. She's just set to believe one thing about her entire life throughout the Centennial. So there's like this island that pops up every 100 years, and every ruler from that like isle is sent to the Centennial to kind of like battle to try and win and break the curse. You think everything that she's been taught, that she kind of like tells you or you read, is like real about her life, literally all the way up until the very end. Like, she thought her mother was killed. She thought she was powerless. Grimm, like this whole person that she kind of like develops this friendship with, and then she develops a friendship with the king of Lightlark, and Grimm is another like ruler from a different isle called Nightshade, and so she like develops these friendships, and then her best friend, the person she thought was her best friend, it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier throughout this book. Her memory was erased, so you go through this whole book, and then in the very end you find out her memory was erased. And that's where you just like, your mind, like, I'm so glad that I didn't read this book when it came out in 2022, because waiting for Sky Shade to come out this year after I read the first 2 books in the series, I was undone, and now waiting for the 4th book, like, I'm still undone. I think what I really struggled with this book, even though it was a 5-star read, was like, why couldn't Grimm just fully trust her to let her keep her memory and give her the choice to decide? But like, he really only decided for himself, and that was like one of my thoughts that I had. One of my favorite quotes from the book was, "Be still, child, don't be easily troubled, you're a warrior. Let them fear you, let them see what it means to be wild." And I was like, I loved that. The next book that I read in January was very much like a Hallmark-esque type romance, where it is less about like spice. Like, there's absolutely no spice in this book. So if you are somebody who wants to read like a romance, like true, I'm telling you, there's no like lust or just sexual explicit content. Like, this book, again, 5 out of 5 stars. This author I found earlier this year has become one of my favorite authors in her books, and it is Cindy Steele, and the book is called The One with the Kiss Cam, and I loved it. It was an incredibly heartfelt and tender story about learning to love, allowing others to take on your burdens, and realizing the best parts of life. My review for the book was I literally wrote, for a book I had 0 expectations about going in, I loved it. I loved how close to home Nora's story was to my own. Her resilience, guilt, shame, and perfectionism. Really, all she wanted was a better life for herself, one better than she had already had and experienced. And Duke came in and showed her life is about living, not planning. Can you see the theme here in my life? Coming back to the moment, be here and right now, that there are men who are gentle, patient, loving, and kind, that they can be your friend first without putting pressure to be sexual, that not all men are the same, and that they all don't suck, or that they don't all suck. And my favorite quote from this book is, "One day when all the stars align for you, maybe you'll date someone. And I sure as hell hope that the guy helps you shoulder a few burdens, not because he doesn't think you're capable, not because he wants to control you, but because he loves you." And that was what Duke said to Nora. There were so many things that I highlighted from that book. I feel like I need to read another quote for you guys. Here's some other highlights I had. Hope and fear like to think they can occupy the same space, but there's only room for one. Another one. The point is, reward takes risk, life is messy, people are messy, nothing is ever going to be perfect, but oftentimes it can be even better than perfect. Here's a couple that I wrote, that I highlighted. The audacity of Duke Weber. If my life were a romantic comedy, that would be the title. And I literally was like kicking my feet giggling. This is one that I like felt really close to home, and it says, there are moments in our lives that can shape us, define us, make us who we are. My entire childhood had been a series of naively extending trust, only to have it broken time and time again. My mom had been married and divorced 3 times before I was 15, with countless boyfriends in between. I thought of how dangerous those years had been. So many strangers, men from all backgrounds, wandering in and out of our lives. Thankfully, my sisters and I had come out of it physically unscathed, but each time we had been left a little more emotionally scarred, tentatively growing attached to the idea of someone, a new husband or new boyfriend, only to be let down again and again. Until one day, we stopped growing attached, stopped caring, no longer trusting, my mom to put our best interests above the shiny lure of a new relationship. But as I grew older, being the oldest, the self-appointed burden of responsibility fell onto my shoulders, and I vowed to give my sisters the childhood lost to me. While my mom showed up to as many basketball games and dances as she could to support her daughters, it was me who paid for their uniforms. It was me who paid for their spot on club teams and dance competitions. I sent them to school with lunch money. At 13, I had begun paying a few $100s a month toward rent, but as I grew older and my work hours grew longer, that amount more than doubled by the time I graduated. By some silent agreement, my mom and I fell into a pattern more suited for a married couple than a mother and daughter. That was the line that I highlighted. I said, though now I wondered what might have happened if I had put up a fuss and made some noise. I was just like, that hit home to me. So as you can see, this is the reason why it was 5 stars, a 5-star plot. The next book I went on to read in January, it was a good month for me, was Nightbane by Alex Astor, which is the second book in the continuation of Lightlark. Pretty much the summary of this is, as certain death races towards Lightlark and secrets from the past begin to unravel, Isla must weigh her responsibility to her people and to her heart. My review. Oh my god, where do I begin? It's like I got to fall in love with Oro, but then I was also falling in love with Grimm. 2 completely different men, 2 stories in the same woman. Also, what the F is Cleo's story? I swear there's more to it. Also, I think the people of Lightlark no longer want to be dependent of a ruler to survive, so that's the other thing. The crazy part is that I didn't remember to say about Lightlark was that the beginning of that book, we find out that if a ruler dies at the centennial, all of their people died. Like, they're also bound to their people, their ruler. So their ruler living is very, very important. The Starling people had kind of mentioned that as well because a Starling ruler died, but one of the other rulers acclimated the Starling power and then became the ruler of that realm and their own realm. I'm also still shocked to hear, like, I cried for weeks. Oh my gosh. I'm pretty sure I have a video of me reading the last 30 pages of Nightbane because my best friend told me she wished she did it, record myself, and I cried. And I cried and I cried and I cried to the fact that I could not believe. I read 2 whole books, and the main character, the female main character that I've grown to love so much, she had been dead the whole time. My favorite quote from this book, okay, was, "The gods don't listen to people like me, but I would go on my knees and beg them to let me keep you. You were once the bane of my existence, and now you are the center of it." That's all I can say. Plot, 5 stars. Writing style, 5 stars. Characters, 5 stars. Moving on to the last book that I read in January. Another 5-star read, Court of Mist and Fury. I know this book is talked about so much online, so I'm not even gonna go super in depth on it. If you haven't read the ACOTAR series, I read it this year and finished it this year, and all I'm gonna say is that my brain chemistry has been forever changed. The 2 quotes that of course everybody in the world knows who have read these books that are my favorite as well is, "To the stars who listen and the dreams that are answered, and don't let the hard days win." I now have that on little rings that I bought myself. Like, my brain chemistry was honestly altered. Let me just give you one quote that's not like a typical quote that I highlighted in the book. Feyre says this to Lucien, "When you spend so long trapped in the darkness, Lucien, you find that the darkness begins to stare back." That one hit hard for me. There's one more. And this one is Rhysand on page 534 saying to Feyre, "I fell in love with you, smartass, because you were one of us, because you weren't afraid of me, and you decided to end your spectacular victory by throwing that piece of bone at Amarantha like a javelin. I felt Cassian's spirit beside me in that moment and could have sworn I heard him say, 'If you don't marry her, you stupid prick, I will.'" And I just, kicked my feet. I won't beat this book to death because I know it's all over the internet. So the next book that I read, these are going throughout February and March, was Double or Nothing, another book by Cindy Steele where there's no spice or anything like that. And it's like a friends to strangers to friends to lovers who kind of like don't realize that their past is more than just like a cute interaction here and there, and there's like a reason that they're perfect for each other. And the only thing I can say is I rated this 3.5 stars, and it's just mainly because Logan and Tessa's story was exactly what I expected. One person like always teetering on the edge of liking the other too much and getting afraid of their feelings. I did love Tessa's point of view in the beginning, but towards the end she kind of like annoyed me with how she acted, and I started to lean towards Logan more, especially like when he like finally admitted his feelings for Tessa. And my favorite quote from this book was, "I didn't want to hurt you, and I thought that by keeping everything light and pushing you away I could save you from me, but come to find out you were the one saving me." And I was like, so cute. Definitely like a light-hearted romance if you just want to read something after kind of like coming out of like a deep fantasy book. The next book I read after that, I only rated 2 stars, and it is Owen Bailey Needs Advice by Jen Atkinson. I want to say, yeah, it's a dual POV romance that I found in the Kindle store, and it's about 2 best friends who have known each other since the 4th grade. They like kind of take a stab at like dating each other, even though he has been secretly in love with her since like they were kids. And I only gave it 2 stars because I found I got really annoyed with like Annie a lot. She was the female main character, and she didn't have much depth to her as like a character, and it almost felt like her sister, like the side character, was more interesting. I did like reading in Owen's point of view much more than I liked reading in Annie's, which I'm thankful for, or otherwise I don't think I would have like finished the book. Owen is the most like patient man, and honestly could have dated around more to see that maybe like Annie wasn't his person, but that's just me. But my favorite quote from this book was, "Because I love you, Annie Archer, and I'd pretty much follow you to the ends of the earth, even if you're wrong about Elsie's waffles." The next one I read after that, I have actually a reading vlog that I will tag right here, and it was Bride. I give it 4 stars. It's the first book I've ever read by Ali Hazelwood, and it is a paranormal romance. You would think, this seems more of like a book to read around Halloween. Honestly, I'm not mad at it. It was so good. It had me eating up every single page. I loved it. I'm so sad that that's not like the typical genre she writes in, because I through and through am like a Twilight kid. And so what it is, the book is about a vampire and a were get married to like form an alliance, like from having like an all-out war happening, because it's like the weres, the vampires, and humans, and they all know of each other's existence and live in their own territories, and they're just trying to keep like a war from happening between humans, vampires, and weres. It's almost giving, oh my gosh, what's that movie from the early 2000s? I want to say like Underworld, but I could be wrong. But I think it's Underworld, right? Where she's like a vampire and he's like a werewolf, and then they have a baby, and then they have this like hybrid baby. So I gave that 4 stars, but I feel like now that I'm thinking back, maybe I should have given it 5. But I wrote for my review that I absolutely love this book. It felt like it could have been an entire series because of all the world building that was happening in the beginning. And I think that's why I knocked 1 star off, because it was a standalone book, but there was so much like world building that really was like happening in the beginning of this book. And I loved the subplot, and I also that like in the end the people that we thought their stories ended only continued, as we see on the last page that Cohen felt Serena was his mate. And that's why I knocked off stars, because I was like, Ali Hazelwood, we need to speak, because why is this a standalone book? You can't do that. Like, you need to make it a series. And I think it was just because of like, there was just like a little bit of that, okay, why are we building a world when we're just doing a standalone book type of thing, especially when you're gonna say Cohen and Serena are mates, when he's like, oh fuck, like literally as he walks through the door. And I just loved how much Misery, the vampire, was like humanized, and how she was like a cyber girly, as a cyber girly myself, like me. Oh, I left out 1 star only because I felt like if we got to see Lo's point of view more, it would make the story even better. And then one of my favorite quotes was, "Our eyes catch and it feels even more menacing than before, a dangerous storm coming, like a current buzzing up my spine and water after a drought. It's frightening, this thing between us." I will say it is very spicy. It's 4 big chilies spicy, maybe even 5 big chilies, like 5 out of 5 big little chilies. It is a very spicy book. Hey guys, I am interrupting you for an important message, which is I am doing a giveaway. I am doing 6 big giveaways, but I just wanted to show you the grand prize and what you could win at the end, December 26th. If you comment, like, and subscribe, you'll need to comment and like on every single video of Vlogmas, and of course be subscribed to my channel. You will be winning this beautiful Coach bag that is filled with skincare, a beautiful Coach wallet with gift cards, makeup by Tarte. You'll also, of course it doesn't fit in this purse, but you'll also be winning this beautiful Man-Eater eyeshadow Tarte palette. And all you have to do, like I said, is comment, like, and subscribe. Subscribe to my channel, but comment and like on every single video of Vlogmas. And then the last 5 days, you really want to pay close attention to the videos, because the last 5 videos I will be doing gift card giveaways, and I'll be reading the number to the gift card at different points in the last 5 days of Vlogmas to Sephora, Ulta, and all my favorite stores. So you'll have to watch those videos, because the first person to, of course, watch the video and input that gift card number into their cart is the one who will receive that gift card. So make sure you stay tuned all throughout Vlogmas. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you later. The next books that I read was A Court of Wings and Ruin, which was another 5-star read, and was actually my favorite like book in the series out of all of them. I think A Court of Frost and Starlight 2 was such a great book, and it doesn't get as much like hype, but there was so many different POVs that I really, really loved it. And one of my favorite quotes, because like I said, I'm not gonna beat the series to death if you've already read it and it's already talked about so much, but one of my favorite quotes from A Court of Wings and Ruin was, "Before going to that place I had once tried to describe to the carver, when it's time to go there, I said quietly, we go together." And this is Farah saying this to Rhysand, and he said, "It's a bargain," he said, and kissed me gently. I murmured back into his lips, "Yes, it is." The skin on my left arm tingled, a lick of warmth snaked down. I looked down to find another tattoo there, the twin to the one that had once graced it, save for the black band of the bargain I'd made with Baraxis. He modified this one to fit around it, to be seamlessly integrated amid the whirls and swirls. I miss the old one, he said innocently. On his own left arm, the same tattoo flowed, not to his fingers the way mine did, but rather from his wrist to his elbow. Copycat, I said tartly. Oh my gosh. It looks better on me. He traced a line down my spine, then poked 2 spots along it. Sweet Baraxis has vanished. Do you know what that means? She said, that I had to go hunt it down and put it back in the library. And I just love that sweet and beautiful moment that they have together in the book. And it's like a very sad moment that you realize later on in the series, because when one dies, the other dies. But I felt that, like, that feeling of loving someone so much that if you go, I go. So I loved that. And then moving on to A Court of Frost and Starlight. Wow, I can't talk. So this was also a 5-star read for me. Like I said, I loved all of the different POVs. The only thing that I am going to talk about this book that I feel like has not been beaten to death, and if you've read this book, I really need you to comment and talk to me about this, because I am dying to talk to people about this, was Moore. Moore had her own like estate in the mountains of the Night Court that nobody knew about, and then she was like on this horse, and she said like she saw something lurking, or she felt something lurking in the woods, and then she just rode off and the chapter ended. And I feel like that chapter was not put there for no reason, especially because in the next book she's like barely around, not even there. I just feel like there's something weird going on with more. I have yet to read the Throne of Glass series or the Crescent City series. That is something that I plan to take on maybe January. I don't know, like I felt something so weird after reading that. So please comment if you felt the same way, because it just didn't sit right with me. It did not sit right. Like, what is she hiding? Especially as I finished the series, like whole series, I felt like what happened with Moore, I need to know the truth. Like everybody, not everybody, but Eris like always says like, oh, Moore knows the real truth. And then we're like, okay, we know what we've been told by Moore, from Moore to Cassian and Azriel and Rhysand, but what's the real story? Why is Eris not talking about it? One of my favorite quotes from the book was, "You make me so very happy. My life is happy, and I will never stop being grateful that you are in it." And that is like one thing that she said down the bond to Rhysand. And I think one of the other things that I really love about their relationship is like their Demetai, I'm probably saying it wrong, but their communication of saying things down the bond, just, I don't know, it's just something in me that craves that. Like exactly that. So the next book that I read was a DNF, and it was Dark Succession by Katie Robert. If I could give that book no stars, I would really give it no stars, because let me tell you, I didn't realize it was going to be a hot romantic thriller. It's like about this like mafia. I literally, after chapter 1, I was like so disgusted. I picked it up, I remember, at Target, and I was like, oh, this could be good. There was like nothing crazy on the back of the book that I would allude to being like this really violent book. It's very, very dark. There's a lot of violence and weird, and within the first chapter I was like, heck no, absolutely not. The next book that I also DNF'd was You'd Be Mine by Erin Hahn, and this was one that I watched another booktuber like rave about, say that she loved. The thing with You'd Be Mine is I felt like the whole book was like trauma dumping, and for me, I DNF'd it halfway through because it just felt very weird, very trauma dumpy. I couldn't see in the plot how these two characters could come together, so it was a no. The next book that I read after that was The Ministry of Time. I read this book in 24 hours. I loved it so much. This one is by Colleen Bradley. Sorry. It was so good. Like, it was like a thrilling time travel spy novel, but also like a little bit of romance. So this book was released this year. It has 3.5 stars, and like I said, it has some spice, but all I can say is like, it's just so crazy, like thinking about like, especially like as a girl who works in tech, like future, like long in the future, could these things happen? Especially because like if I could work in any area of technology, like it would be in like astrophysics, something super crazy with like time and space. I love and obsessed with space, always been obsessed with space, and so this book really kind of like brought that to me. It has nothing to do with space, but like time travel, if you get what I mean. I really love this book, and I rated it 4 stars, I think just because like towards the end there was like a little bit of like a plot hole with like the time travel concept, and for me that kind of just threw like the book off a little bit for me. Next book that I read after that was Business or Pleasure by Rachel Lynn Solomon, and I remember having so many highlights from this book. This book doesn't have like a high rating on Goodreads or Fable. It has like 3.76 stars. I read this book in under 24 hours because the way I felt like I was Chandler and she was me, like so many highlights came out of this book. I want to love what I'm doing. This is the first quote I loved. I want to love what I'm doing with my whole heart. Or is it just a lie that society sold millennials when we were young? None of us really love our jobs. The other one that I highlighted was bullshit kind of encapsulates the millennial experience. Because the thing is, some of the stars are really fucking far away from the moon. And maybe you don't want one of those distant stars at all. Maybe you never wanted the moon in the first place. You don't know if you even want to go to space, but you got to make a decision soon. And it better be something you can see yourself doing for the rest of your life. There's just no room for uncertainty key, the place I seem to live these days. There's more quotes in here, and I'm going to convince you to read this. It's very spicy though, romance, but it's so good. She also says, journalism let me forget that I once dreamed of this, and the deeper I got, the less it mattered. I went years without writing fiction, without writing anything for myself, and I convinced myself I didn't miss it until the layoff, which might have been the best thing that's ever happened to me, until I opened the blank document and realized this has always felt right. Not easy necessarily, or at least not always, but right. Like the words have just been waiting for their time to spill out and scatter across the page. She also says, I'm a writer. I've always been a writer, but somewhere along the way, maybe to shield myself from the possibility of failure, I stopped writing for myself. I stopped writing for the pure love of it and let my voice disappear into someone else's. Another one. I've been running for so long that I'm no longer sure where the finish line is, or if there's a finish line at all, and sometimes that terrifies the shit out of me. My whole life I've been working myself to the bone, chasing something that's always out of reach. And those quotes like really just lived with me. Like, I related to her so much. And then his name was Finnegan. It's Finn, and she follows this guy around on a book tour, and she's like his ghostwriter. And what's so funny is like he was like the werewolf on one of like these like popular shows, kind of like the Vampire Diaries, and he's like doing all these like fan Comic-Con things, and then they kind of like end up falling in love. And when I say she is me, I literally love like the little applesauce pouches. And so when she goes to his house, and like the last couple of chapters of the book, he has like every flavor of the applesauce packages in his pantry, and I was just like, a love language. Just the next one, I can't remember the girl's name specifically, which is so bad because I really love this book and I rated it 5 stars. But I read a graphic novel, and it was Lore Olympus Volume 1. I have not been able to find Volume 2 in a single store anywhere since reading Lore Olympus, and I loved it so much. Like, I finished it in like 20 minutes. It was so good. It's like a story about Hades and the Greek gods and the love stories, and it was just so cute, and I loved it so much. The next one I read was The Burnout by Sophie Kinsella, and this one is a romantic comedy, and it's where like 2 burnt out professionals meet at like the seaside resort in England, and as they try to like get rid of their burnout, there's like these little like weird and quirky messages that kind of like bring them together to rediscover themselves and energy between them, and it's super like funny and relatable. I mean, it's a little corny at some points, if I'm being honest, but I also just never felt so like aligned again with a character where just the things that were happening to her. There's like one point in the beginning of the book where she is working for this company and she's just so burnt out at this point, and she's like looking outside the window and there's like a nunnery whatever, and she's like, I'm gonna go join them, and she like has this like whole breakdown from her job, like leaves work after this like really crappy meeting, and she like runs in to the church and she's like, I want to join. Like, she just wants this life of like peace and not having to like feel so burnt out from work and all this stuff, and like they don't let her join, and then so like it sends her into like even bigger spiral. And I was just dying laughing because it's just something I would do, where I'm just like, screw it, like I'm gonna join the church, like I'm just gonna become a nun, I don't have to worry about bills, I'll live at the church. Like it was just a very funny concept that you have to read if you have not heard of that book before. The next book that I read was Summer of '69. That book is the first Ellen Hildebrand book that I read, and I really had to sit with that one after. It was like a historical fiction where it was like historical moments that happened in Boston and Cape Cod and all those things, and a lot of like things that happened but like a fake family that it happened around. And it took me a long time to actually get through this book. It was a beach read that took me the entire beach vacation to get through, because I feel like there was just so much going on with each character. Every chapter was a different character, different POV, different things, that I ended up just getting whiplash from like each POV character. But overall, like, it was a good story and like well put together. So I did end up reading The Summer of '79 after that, and I felt like they were both like 3.5 star reads, and it just follows their lives 10 years later and kind of picks up on the cliffhanger that was left over or happened from the last book. And again, like, it was okay, but it didn't make me like want to keep reading more of her books. So the next book that I read was Dragon Fruit by Makia Lucier. And this one said it was a young adult book, and it was really, really young adult. Like, I felt like almost like a 12-year-old could read that book. I think it's in my Instagram Picks My Reads for a Week vlog. That one, honestly, like, it was such a cute read. Like, it gave like almost like Moana vibes, and I could see it definitely being like a kids movie, but I think for me it just wasn't giving adult themes. And I think the reason it got labeled as young adult is because there's like moments where like it talks about child like abuse, where like she like did child labor, and she like worked on the ship for this like pirate dragon like guy who like used dragon scales to like cut people on their hands when they weren't doing their work. Like, that was like the most like intense thing about the book. For me, it just wasn't it. Like, it was a cute kid story, but at the end of the day, like, it felt like it was like a book for like a 5th grader. The next one I read after that was The Earl Next Door by Ashton Newbold. She's also like such an underrated author, and I found this one in the Kindle bookstore, and she made me fall in love with a Regency romance, because let me tell you, Henrietta and Charlie's banter throughout this book, I've never watched Bridgerton or anything like that, but their banter was everything. If you are not a Regency romance girly, or you are, you have to read this book. It was so good. Their banter, all of it was everything, and it's actually 3 books. I still have yet to read the 2nd and the 3rd book, and I know that I need to, so I'm just telling you, just so good. The writing is incredible. It's like the pacing, everything else. Like, I remember I bought this book, because same thing with Cindy Steele. I remember now why I bought her books, because I was trying to buy books on my Kindle to like have to like kind of settle down for the night, because I knew if I would read like the ACOTAR series as I was reading them through the year, like if I read them like before bedtime, I was not going to go to bed. Same thing with Light Lark and all that. And so I'm like, oh, just get these like cute little books, gobbled them up. Cindy Steele, Ashton Newbold, The Earl Next Door. You'll love it. The next ones I really got into Audible this year are some audiobooks. And so the first audiobook that I listened to this year that blew me away, because I'm not really like an audiobook girly, and now I feel like I am, is because of this author, and it's Cara Bastone's book called Seatmate. And it is like a whole production. Like, Cara Bastone, all of her books are like a full-on production. So I'll like quick fire all the books. So Seatmate was so good, and it's about 2 people who are on like the bus ride. So there's like buses that take you between Boston and New York, and they're on the bus ride, and there's just like a whole cast, everything. There's background noise, and it's so cute, and like the ending is so cute, and I love that they ended up together. The next one is Love at First Sight, and it's about like 2 students who are in a psychology class together, have to do this project and have to interview people, and Robbie is so freaking cute, and she falls first, she falls hard. Love that one. The next one, Call Me Maybe, is like an intertwined series to Sweet Talk, which were both really, really good. And all I'll say about these 2 is that Sweet Talk had a twist that I never could have ever thought about, and Call Me Maybe was like such like a cute and sweet book to listen to. And then the next one that I listened to that is not on my list is Maybe Next Time. No, Maybe This Time. See, I had to make sure I was saying it right. And that one was so cute, and it's like about how this girl falls through this wormhole, but then the only person that she can call in the past is this guy that she was like barely kind of friends with, and just it's really, really cute. And like I said, like a whole production. There's like multiple voice actors, there's background noises, street noises, typing, all that stuff. So if you want like something to listen to while you're working, you know, cleaning, just hanging out, doing whatever, I 10 out of 10 recommend those books. On to my next read, which was The Gate to Kagoshima by Poppy Kuroki, and I got this as a Amazon first read, so I got early access to this book because I am like a Kindle Unlimited member, and it has 3.25 stars, but I really love this book, and it's an action-packed historical romantasy where a Scottish woman who's also like a quarter Japanese time travels to samurai era Japan and like falls in love with a samurai and has to like make choices that can change history, even though she knows what would happen in the history like of it all. So the reason I love this book so much is, if you don't know this about me, I lived in Japan for 2 years. I lived in Iwakuni, Japan, which is like a 30-minute train ride to Hiroshima, and I fell in love. I never thought I could have loved somewhere as much as I loved living in Japan. It was, again, a brain altering, change my brain chemistry experience of like feeling safe as a woman, all this stuff. But beyond that, I really loved how she was like going for a run, and then there's like these shrines and all this stuff that like people walk up to all the time, and she kind of like knew about the history of it, and that's what she was doing there. She was like studying for school and studying like the history of her family and all this stuff. And then as she like walks through this like shrine, she ends up like falling through this like time loop. It was just like a really cool way of like seeing like what would happen if somebody from the future like fell into this time loop into the past. It's almost kind of giving Outlander, even though I've never seen the show or read the books before, but I know like the premise is like this lady falls in love with somebody from the past, but she also time travels. But this one was like she got stuck in the past, she was stuck there, she knew everything that was going to happen, she knew these people were going to die, and a lot of the book is like actual real true like samurai history. So I really loved that, and it was just like her falling in love with this man from the past. And then what is like the biggest like mind ever is that when she comes back, this guy that she was like supposed to have like a coffee date with, like he says something to her that she had only said to the samurai guy in the past, and he's like, I know you. And she's like, yeah, like I've been all over the news, I've been the girl that's missing for the last 3 months, and I just pop back up in the future, like of course you recognize me. And he's like, no, there's just a moment that he like said, oh lass, no little lass, that's what it was. He was like, no little lass, like I remember you. And I was like, wait, what? And then the book ends, and that had made me like really just fall in love with the book and be like, okay, when this book like actually gets released, because like I said, I got a pre-release, and then of course you can only have so many like unlimited books for free on your Kindle, then you have to like trade them in and out. So I had to trade it out, and I'm like, I'm 10 out of 10 getting that book like in hard copy when it comes out. It was so good. So if you love a historical romance, Gate to Kagoshima by Poppy Kuroki is so good. Moving on to the last couple of books that I finished in the last month or so is A Court of Silver Flames. I really loved, like I said, I'm not gonna go crazy in depth, I really loved how much growth happened with Nesta, and we got to see Cassian's POV, but also Cassian has more POV time in the book series than Rhysand, who's like the love of my life. So please, if you're taking notes, Sarah J Maas, please give Azriel and Rhysand more book time. I would appreciate their POVs because they deserve it. But either way, Nesta story just grew on me so much. There were so many things that I highlighted from that book and just like took away from the book of how like just so many things in your life come to it. And I loved the female friendships that happened in that book and the growth of it all, and I hope and pray that she's writing the next one or is planning to write another, and that the story gets to continue. And speaking of continuing stories, I'm going to talk about a series called Powerless, which also has probably been all over the internet and everybody knows about, but I had it on my shelf all year this year, and it took me until November to finally read Powerless, Powerful, and Reckless, and I read all 3 books in 3 days. I've had them on my shelf for months, since July, when I saw somebody else recommend it on YouTube, and I was like, oh, I'll get to that one, like I don't know, maybe, like I was like, I don't know if another fantasy series could live up to it. And now I yearn for Kai Azure, and I also mourn and cry for the fact that what the fuck happened with Mac in the last book. Like, can we please get Mac in the next book? Also, the next book comes out on my birthday, best secret birthday gift to myself ever. I'll be in the bookstore that day. What happened with Mac? And Adina did not deserve that death. Like, how are you gonna give me her death and then give me a book about leading up to her death? Like, you just ripped my soul out 2 times. And then Reckless. All I have to say about Reckless is I swear, okay? We know that it ends with Kit asking Peyton to marry him, but I swear if Kai and Peyton are not endgame, I'm going to riot in the streets. Like, I swear if this last book comes out and they are not endgame, like together, happily ever after, like they have to flee the kingdom to be happily ever after, I'm going to be rioting in the streets. That's how I feel about that. And last but not least, if you saw in my vlog from yesterday or maybe 2 days ago, I finished Sky Shade. And Sky Shade, again, is the continuation of Nightbane and Isla Grimm and Oro's freaking love triangle that literally sent me on a mental spiral when I was reading that in the cabin. And all I have to say is that all I desperately want for Isla is for her to have a happy ending. Her life has always not been about hers. And the fact that like her prophecy was like she would end the world or save it. And I get that she saved it by pushing her and the like OG wildling lady through the portal that I cannot think of her name right now. But it's the fact that like she doesn't get a happy ending just made me so sad. And then the tension between her and Oro and her and Grimm and the fact that she both loved them, it was really hard for me to watch. That now I'm like, maybe they both just like don't be with her, because at the end of the day, like her and Grimm's life are always tied together. But maybe now that she's gone through this portal, like she regains her own life back. She's no longer dead, she's in a whole different realm. Like that's what they said would happen. And maybe like we move on from this love triangle and move on into something else in the next 2 books, because I do not think I can take any more of her and Grimm and her and Oro. Like I don't even know who to pick anymore, because at the end of the day I feel like she was breaking my heart the way she was breaking the both of their hearts by not choosing them. Whew, that was a lot. That was a whole hour of me talking. And I just want to say, if you're still here, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it so much. If you haven't entered into the giveaway, make sure you do. I'm going to be announcing a second giveaway tomorrow that's completely separate from the one that you have been seeing me talk about for December, because we're still in December. I am just going to mood read. I don't think I have any TBR specific things planned. I do have something that I bought off of Etsy that I may make a video out of this month. I'm not quite sure yet, but either way, I think I'm gonna mood read. One of my friends who lives in my apartment complex just yesterday asked if we should tandem read Fourth Wing. I've never read Fourth Wing before. I know that's also a very popular book, so I might start reading that. But I also have some books that I borrowed from Libby, so I'll just share those little tidbits with you before I leave that I also need to read. So I currently have out from Libby The Book That Wouldn't Burn. I actually have that book on my shelf, and honestly I probably won't even have time to read it, so I'm just going to return this. The Red Queen I have out. This Is How You Lose the Time War I have out. I also have The Holiday Mix-Up, Heartless Hunter, and then Fourth Wing out. So those are currently what I have out on my shelf that I'm gonna focus on reading this month and see if I can accomplish that, and then we'll come back in January and we'll talk about all the books that I read in December. But either way, this was all of the books I read in 2024, and I'm so proud of myself for how many books I read this year, despite like having finals and taking 20 credits and working like 4 jobs in the beginning of the year and then going down to 1 come August. I can't believe that I just made the time to do all of that. Yeah, please tell me in the comments what you read, your book recommendations. As you can see, I'm clearly like a really big fantasy lover. So if you have any fantasy or fantasy romance, if I'm gonna read like a standalone romance, I do like more of like a rom-com or like a very clean and like wholesome romance. Like I'm not like big on a regular romance that's like spicy. Like I want yearning, I want things that like drag, like I want their yearning for each other to drag out for like 400 pages before they kiss. And that is what The Earl Next Door was. Like it was yearning that led up to a kiss after 400 pages, like a single kiss, and that's it. That's all you got. So if you have that, put that in the comments for me. And if it's a fantasy, you better like find a way to make sure that I see it, because I need to see it. Either way, thank you so much for joining me on another day of Vlogmas, and of course I'll see you tomorrow. Duh!